Hi, welcome to Up Your Nerd Cred. Did you used to know everything that was happening in the Marvel and DC universes? Did finding out that some superheroes are from Marvel and some are from DC blow your mind? Has keeping track of everything happening there, and then realizing we're only talking about the comics universes, not the cinematic unit ones, and these different universes with their own multiversal crises have gotten a little bit out of hand? Well, don't worry. Up Your Nerd Cred is here to talk about the gods cosplaying as men, the men cosplaying as gods, and how much the cinematic universes are really leaving out. At the end of each episode, you'll hopefully know a little bit more than you did and can up your nerd cred. I'm your casual nerd host, Cece. I'm wearing my very cool shirt that has a list of some of the Black women who will see you in court. On TV, at least. Look, I left the profession for a number of reasons, and the practice of law on TV is very different to real life. But instead of a soliloquy about that and the casual way that they start orientation in law school by telling you about how lawyers are superheroes, in the same breath that they discuss how terrible the mental health of lawyers as a profession is, should be a red flag. Now, listeners, I am very excited for us to have another guest on this week. Now, yes, I got my BS in psychology, but I want to have actual experts available to actually tell us what matters about things. And this guest is actually perfect for talking about the mental health of actual superheroes. May I introduce Dr. Mercedes, who really needs to be hired by Marvel to, be in charge of all of their mental health thing. But, we'll get back to that soon.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to jump in and talk about this. And so, as Susie shared, I am actually a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a mental health advocate. I'm a CEO of my own private practice where I empower Black families through trauma-informed care and pop culture also, right, to help them really understand how to be healed and be whole. And my claim to fame is the founder of Shame-Proof Parenting. That's my book. That is my business. That is my life. And why I'm here today is to talk a little bit about my prismatic Afro nerd self too, that also gets infused in the rest of all of this stuff. So we're going to dive in and talk about, I kind of like that idea of upping your nerd cred. I'm like, yeah, let's do it.
Exactly. Right? There's just people who walk around with their various levels. There's some people who are just I'm really good about, I nerd this thing, but I have no idea about this, and I'm going to look real silly at trivia night. I don't want people looking silly at trivia night. They want them to have, all the information that they could possibly need. Trivia night or in conversation with their friends, whatever. Podcast listeners, I want to make sure that we are clear that just because we are clarifying what we are about does not mean that we're going to skip out on what the format is of the podcast is, right? Of course, right. So, what are we nerding out about this week? Just a reminder, you can nerd out about all kinds of things. It doesn't just have to be heroes and villains. Ivanka Trump choosing to wear white for her Lunar New Year post was a choice. I don't remember Chuck E. Cheese being this dang expensive when I was 5. And I hope those of you observing Ramadan don't have to deal with too many jackasses pretending that you're just skipping lunch. Because I saw somebody do that on Threads today and I wanted to fight them. So, Dr. Mercedes, what are you fighting? What are you nerding out about?
Fighting about? No. What am I nerding out about? Well, I actually finished the America's Next Top Model documentary, which was OMG.
I haven't sat through all of it yet, but I've seen a bunch of commentary and
yes,
people there's some people who are just Tyra was just kind of industry standard, and everybody in the industry was just me, and other people were just Tyra, if you're going in there to make it better for people, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. And I'm definitely that millennial who watched it when I was a kid and totally absorbed it. And talking about kind of my mental wellness and representation kind of lens, I'm watching it now through my older adult lens. And it's such a different experience that when I was watching as a kid, I kind of, oh yeah, behind the scenes, this is what modeling is. And this is what it's like. That's what I really internalized. And now looking at it, I'm kind of that's not what modeling was. And they really tortured these girls and assaulted these girls and humiliated these girls. And that wasn't modeling at all.
I actively remember, because I was watching it when Yaya and Takara were those, I thought they were the top models on their season. Like, they were fantastic, and Tyra was just, like, doing everything in her power to not, and I couldn't understand it.
Right. Right.
Although, I did hear a rumor that Janice Dickinson, leaked the whole, like, the winners of precast thing because one of her faves was getting short shrift, and, like, one of the, like, the big brands, like, had not had her on the list, and so Janice was, like, leaking stuff, and I'm just like, "Okay, I did not know you're first supermodel, and, like, you got some clout. I got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay."
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. That
completely
was a
separate from that, though. Oh, go ahead.
No, no, I was gonna say that is kind of what I've been geeking out a lot, and it's like that nostalgia of it. I think it's very interesting to be dealing with it now. Even those people like
Oh,
that
yeah.
that Janice Dickinson stuff and all of that stuff. It's like we grew up with that type of reality TV, and it just felt like normal to me. But now watching it, it feels like it was kind of icky. I think there was a little bit of ickiness then, but I didn't know to
Yeah.
call it ickiness. And now I'm like, yeah, that's what I was feeling back then. I just didn't know what that was, you know?
I mean, the fact that there's a lot of conversations happening about, like, yeah, so, ANTM, like, recorded somebody's sexual assault and then just tried to be like, "Oh, haha, you're cheating on your boyfriend," and I'm just like, I missed that part of the thing. That is a problem. So,
Right.
eh,
Right.
yes. Well, in slightly lighter nerding out things, the weather is warming out and the roving gangs of cartels are out and they are everywhere. They're in front of grocery stores, they're in front of community centers, they're in front of dispensaries. That's right, guys. It's Girl Scout cookie season time, and the Thin Mints keep creeping into my face. Place. I intend to just have two, and next thing I know, there's two sleeves missing shortly thereafter. They're missing. Where did they
I'm a
go?
lemonades. It's lemonades for me. It's the lemonades for me.
Listen, if I diversify too much, it becomes a problem because
Yeah,
then it's just going to be like all of my money
I
is
know.
going out and
I know. I know.
honestly, I feel like a reformed dealer sometimes too, though, because like when I was a Girl Scout, I was the top sales girl. Okay, like I did more than anybody else in my troop, and I did it without my uniform because I was that damn cute. Please buy a box of cookies from me. Please? And for some reason, people would just be like, "Oh yeah, sure, absolutely." Of course, it was when it was $2.50 a box, so it's probably a little bit easier to like convince people to buy $2.50 a box
Yeah.
for things. Actually, we're gonna go take a quick break real fast to find out how much the cookies are and maybe see if we can find anyone who has an online order phone, and we'll be back to up your nerd cred.
Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba.
Welcome back. So, Marvel as a property has been around for a pretty substantive amount of time, right? They're first founded as Timely Comics in 1939. Now, we didn't actually get any black superheroes for the first 27 years of the company's run, actually, of any of the comics company's runs, honestly. T'Challa's introduction as the Black Panther in 1966 was groundbreaking because he was acknowledged as the first black superhero. And he was actually like the first non-white Avenger as of Avengers number 52 in 1968. Like he's the first non-white person to join the Avengers. And honestly, I just want to throw out the fact that he went from like introduced in 66 to in the Avengers in 68. Like I'm just saying like black excellence is there, we just be hanging out. But we're not going to worry about that part as much because as much black excellence as we have, the stigma of having a mental illness from the time that Timely Comics started, honestly, until now, really, it might have gone down some, but it hasn't gone away, okay? The millennials who are discussing the conversation that they've had with their therapists publicly, that's something that would probably have shocked the pants off the Timely Comics guys, right? But realistically speaking, they were not actually spending any time thinking about or like considering the mental health of the characters that they have and like how the things that they came across, the things that were happening to them would impact their mental health. And since it is, of course, Black History Month, we're going to spend some time talking about the mental health of the black characters that we've seen in the Marvelverse. And maybe we'll see if we can draw any fun and exciting conclusions from there. What do you think, Dr. Mercedes? Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a great plan.
All right. So Let's start with Luke Cage, whose legal name is Carl Lucas. He was created by Archie Goodwin, John Romita Sr., George Tuska, and Roy Thomas, and he debuted in Hero for Hire #1 in 1972. So when we were first introduced to him, he has been in prison. He has been subjected to involuntary experiments on him, and it's rendered his whole physical form is like nigh invulnerable, right? Like he can do a lot. And so the 1970s Luke Cage, like there's a lot of his like within his costuming and such, like there's chains and such that he has as a means of saying like I'm going to be breaking these chains. But I feel like there's a lot of like 1970s blaxploitation vibes going on with that kind of thing. So what if we talk about Luke Cage in like the 20s? So Dr. Mercedes, like what was going on with like Luke Cage more recently? Like had they actually like done anything to address his mental health thing at all in the 20s? You
I
know, had
mean,
they broken any of his chains?
hey, let's be real. I think Luke Cage, as you've mentioned, has always kind of been the synonymous for Black masculinity. Whereas you have like someone like T'Challa and Black Panther who has like the power of kind of vibranium. Luke Cage kind of is just a Black man, right? He's just this Black guy out in the world. And so him having superpowers, I
Mm-hmm.
think in a sense, gives him a whole nother intersectionality that just being a Black man kind of makes it harder for him, if you will. And so
Yeah.
from what I understand of him and what's happened, no, I don't think he's really had that big of a change. But I think
Okay.
what's happened is he's moved from that blaxploitation kind of coded person, maybe to more of a relational hero. He
Mm-hmm.
kind of gets married to Jessica Jones, right? Becomes a father. He kind
Yeah.
of becomes this person who is no longer just hero for hire like he was when you were talking about his day, and kind of
Yeah.
becomes this human who's a part of society, right? He's not just the brawn. He's not just the guy you bring in for hero for hire.
Yeah.
I like that he becomes kind of humanized, if you will. That era, I think, kind of allows him to be more vulnerable, even though what's his main power? He's literally invulnerable, right?
Invulnerability. Yeah.
Right?
Which
And so I think
I mean, I imagine that the fights that he would have with Jessica Jones though would be really wild because she's just like in it's unstoppable force. He's immovable objects. Like I know the
right,
two of them have like some wild fights, but also
right.
it is very cool though. Like I feel like Mike Colfer did like a really solid job of just like portraying him, and I think that they also like did a really good job of like pointing out too like how even with the people like even with presumably are people in positions of power, like even nominal power, there's still a lot of stuff that has to be done
Yes.
in
Yes.
kind of a we're not we're
Yeah.
not really given like the same like capacity and ability to be able
Right.
to go and exercise power in just like administrative and bureaucratic ways in many ways. Like a lot of like what
Right.
Luke Cage is dealing with.
Right.
Even within the Netflix series, like there's
Yeah.
a whole bunch of just like bureaucracy and like mess happening throughout like all the stuff with the city. And there's a certain amount of it that his power is to punch, punching.
Yeah.
There's only so much punching that you could do.
Yeah. But I think that's really synonymous with what it means or what oftentimes is represented for Black male or Black masculine kind of vulnerability. And him being physically invulnerable allows him to kind of mask a little bit that emotional vulnerability. But if
Ooh,
you're
yeah.
bringing up the Netflix show, I think it really forced him to really come out of that kind of self-imposed shell of, can I be a leader? Can I actually support my community? Harlem needs me, but I'm traumatized from what I went through, and I'm traumatized from who I am, and even that unworthiness, that am I worthy enough to be the leader of my community? Even though I've gone to jail, even though I was wrongfully accused, I still had that
But
prison trauma. I still have this stuff. And so I think what we saw, especially in the Netflix show, and I really hope they bring him back to the Disney Plus stuff and the Marvel Spotlight stuff that we have now, but you
yeah,
saw a man who was coming kind of through the same stuff that most Black men have to deal with in America: incarceration, the community needing them, worthiness. They're emotional expression, and you watch this whole man try to figure that out with his ability to be physically invulnerable, but
Plus,
trying to
I think
figure out.
it's worth like comparing to the way that he's trying to go about things, because there's the push and pull of just like, we have to go about this the right way. We have to do things legitimately. Legitimacy isn't helping us. We've tried to do things legitimately and it's not helping.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of just like, how much legitimacy do you give up to like to achieve your
Yeah.
goals, and how much of your goals do you give up to be able to achieve legitimacy? And I feel like
There.
that's a really the that
Yeah.
push-pull, like, I feel like it's not really addressed a lot
At
in
all.
these things, and, like, I think that they really they have done better by our superheroes than in the past, because,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I wanna move to somebody else who isn't
Yeah.
invulnerable, but, I mean, as an Omega 5 mutant, your girl is a goddess, hey? Now you
Yes.
can sit there and be like, "Yeah, okay, she's a goddess, which means her power is kinda maxed out on Earth."
Yeah.
Whatever, guess where she lives? On Earth. Who am I talking about? Alright?
Woo!
We're talking about Aurora Monroe, okay?
Yes.
Who was
Yes.
created by Lynn
Yes.
Wein and Dave Cockrum, okay? She made her debut in Giant Size X-Men #1 in 1975, okay? She's like level mutant, okay? Like, she could sit there and like go blow for blow with like a whole bunch of folks. Dr. Doom is sitting there just like being real polite to her. Like, he's sitting there just being like, "You look great." And Dr. Doom ain't like, like one to like lay on like words all willy-nilly,
I
okay?
know.
This man is
I know.
so like we are not like anybody who is not putting any kind of respect. You know who didn't put respect on Storm's name? Brian Singer. And that's how we ended up with that stupid, like, what happens to toads when they get
You
struck
know,
by lightning thing.
I'm a throw in this real quick. I have had a whole reckoning with that storm because, and this is again, I'm going back to my mental wellness and representation here. What we got as young child, teenager Black women
Mhm.
was a storm that was so nerfed and so used just for like the male storyline that they kind of almost use Holly Berry, I think, the way that she often got used in movies as just the eye candy. And by
Yeah.
doing that, it really relegated Storm to just being one of the female superheroes, not so much, like you said, her Omega, love powers. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that I really want to bring in with that is that with Storm, her whole mental and emotional wellness is actually super tied to her ability to manage her power.
Yes.
And so the fact that that always gets messed up until 97, until X-Men 97, but the fact that sometimes they ignore that or they kind of just try to push her through it is something that I think happens a lot to Black superheroes. It happens to Luke Cage, it happens to Shuri, it happens to everyone. And we're going to talk about her Ironheart. They just
Yeah.
get pushed through because you have a power and you're smart and you can do it. But I love some of the stories that let them sit in their grief, that let them sit in their PTSD, that let them sit in. I know Storm's history was her whole community needed her and she was overwhelmed by that. I can't be everything to my community,
Yeah.
right? Like all of those points need to be highlighted when we talk about superheroes because even though she's a mutant and even though she's a mega level mutant, she still has those mental and emotional blocks that sometimes can influence her ability to even use her powers at her full level.
There is a very specific scene in X-Men 97. I do not remember which episode this is, but Storm is having a full PTSD, like, panic attack. And, like, like, everybody needs her. And she is trying so hard. Like, she's got, like, the cape and, like, the outfit and, like, the flowing hair. And she is curled up in a ball trying to just remember that she exists, despite the fact that she is a literal earth goddess. Like,
Yeah.
she's like,
Yeah.
she's a storm, like, she is a full ass goddess. And she's just like, I think that like she was buried alive in her youth or something. And so it gave her like a really intense like claustrophobia and PTSD. And like, but it felt like in 97, like a lot of what they were doing with it, like it kind of just like happened to her, kind of happened at her. I feel like it was one of those things where it was like, used more as, like, the occasional plot point of just, like, "Oh, like, Storm, like, we need you to get it together, Storm, like, figure out how to, like, get on the other side
That,
of, like, your panic attack."
that, that.
Not like, we have like, Storm is, like, out of commission, and we're gonna have to sit there and, like, let her ride it out, and we're gonna have we're gonna have to somebody with Storm to help her ride this out. We're gonna have to be able to, like, help her woosah. Nobody is doing
Yes.
anything to help her, like,
Yes.
woosah her way through this.
Yes. And
And
if I can say why, one of my reasons why, and I think this is something to really pay attention with Storm's history, there
mhm,
hasn't been any Black female writers on her story ever that I can think of. I can't think of any Black female writers who have had control of her story. And I think there's only been a handful of Black male writers that have had control of her story.
wow.
Yeah, think about that. This whole time she's been out. Like, when did she come out? Like, you have it in your notes. Like,
See, yeah,
she's been out since the
1975.
70s. There's been no Black female major writers on her runs.
I saw somebody note on TikTok recently a conversation about how Storm was going to have a beautiful baby girl. And I think like part of the thing was like, who was the father? And like, actually, like, I want to say it was like the Black gay comic geek. I want to say that it was him who said that like, that he thought that like it might actually end up being like Scarlet Witch. Because she's over there sitting there just like being like, I'm going to be Sorcerer Supreme. And it's not like we don't have like, precedent for her just seeing like,
Yeah.
oh, you want a baby?
Yeah. This makeup go
Boom,
for you.
here
I
we
got
go.
you.
Here's
Boom.
a baby. Here's
Can
a
I just say
baby.
something as
Like
a
you,
side note? I've always appreciated in Multiverse of Madness when Doctor Strange says to her, you can't just like do this. She's like, well, isn't that what all mothers do? Just like conjure babies?
we create life. And I'm just like,
yes.
like on one hand, yes, that's what we do. But on the other, girl, come on. But
I
they
love it.
also, the podcast listeners go back to like season 1, like where we talk about Wanda Maximoff. But listen, they did her so dirty in that.
Agreed.
So dirty. Like,
Agreed.
I know that our focus is on Black mental health, but Scarlet Witch has been honestly so abused by the MCU in ways that I think that even like her comics counterpart was not. And that is a whole other conversation to get into. But because we were talking about Storm and how Scarlet Witch might be Storm's baby daddy. But let's, who we can talk about? Let's talk about
Yes.
Storm's ex-man. Let's talk
Okay.
about T'Challa. All right.
Yeah.
Because
Let's do it.
as a goddess, the fact that she is like, the fact that she sat there and deigned to marry, like, this Wakandan king guy, like, I feel like he did not understand how lucky he was, how well he married up, sir. You have vibranium. Okay, that's fine. But guess what? Once she hits that lightning storm, it's going to sit there and vibrate you till, Anyway, so T'Challa himself was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And he debuted, as we said, in Fantastic Four number 52 in 1966. All right. Now, like, you got your first Black superhero, right? And you have like this first person who's like, this is kind of the first opportunity for a lot of Black kids to see themselves represented. And we talked about last week how like there's a lot of Black kids who sat there and had to sit there and deal with like, I'm not sure how I feel about this character, but because they are the only Black character, like I am going to cling to them. Like they are like, because that is kind of like your only bit in the life preserver. And I think it's really interesting how there's a lot of Black Panther that he has. I feel like there's like a lot of like him as a character. He's like put very like pedestalized.
Yes.
So
Yes.
he's like put
yes.
like on the same like kind of vein as like Cap and Cyclops and all that. Like he's on the same level,
Yeah.
and yet he's not like. And he does get respect as the King of Wakanda, but he does not get respect as him being as brilliant and as tactically focused. And it's just like,
Yeah.
like they look at him really as just like that man be sitting, like they kind of treat him like he's Bruce Wayne when they should be treating him like he's Batman.
Yes. Yes.
And I feel like
I think
like that disconnect is like huge.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something that happened a lot in comic books with Black characters because they were written by white men. And there was this reverence that Black people are so great and we want to show them being great and we want to show them being excellent, that in doing that, I think it kind of stripped us of our humanity. Yes, we're excellent, but we also have emotional issues and wounds. And like T'Challa is the leader of a whole country, and all of the emotional, political, bureaucratic stuff that comes with that kind of gets washed away because these kind of white creators want a Black character that like exudes composed and strategic, right? I think there's this idea that even his vibranium in his suit, that he's almost nearly impenetrable, so you can't even touch him. And while I think that's a great thing to kind of have on the surface, I think really having the opportunity to have Black creators, I think Reginald Hudlin actually ended up doing some of his work, and Ta-Nehisi Coates has done some runs of Black Panther that I think help Black Panther to show himself as a Black man, as an African leader, not just as this Black Panther superhero, like you said, right? He's not just Batman, but he's also underneath he's a prince and he's a king and he's a son and he's a, leader. He's all these things that matter. And I think
Mhm.
those pieces are really important when we're talking about representation. We don't just want to see Black characters who can do everything and be excellent. We also want to see what they look like when they're with their families and when they're kind of in the community, supporting their community. What does that vulnerability look like? I think that is
'Cause
something I would love to see for
there's
characters
the
like that.
vulnerability I think that we got a little bit of just, like, whenever it's just, like, Okoye and Shuri talking about, like, did he freeze? Whenever, like, Nakia pops up. But, him, like, freezing because he's got a crush on a girl, I feel like they're not giving enough, like,
There
attention
you
to,
go.
like because think about okay, because listen, Barack Obama loves him some Michelle. That man loves him some Michelle, but that man, if you look at the way that he looked at the beginning of his 8 years and the way that he looked at the end of his 8 years, like, that man was
Yeah,
aged. That man
yeah,
was
yeah.
stressed, all right?
Because they
And
put him
he was
through it.
only doing it for 8 years. Like, T'Challa, like, look, I respect, like, the whole, like, premise of he was groomed for this, it's been his whole life, but, like, that kind of weight on you, like, and,
Yeah,
like, once he's stepping into the role of regent after his parent has died.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
so, like,
yeah,
we're like,
yeah,
if we're, like, going into, like, the MCU, like, he's sitting there trying to figure out how to exist, like, his father has died and he's finding out like he's figuring out like in many ways like how much like Wakanda was cut off from the world and how much like how much
yeah,
of an active decision that they made and like he's
yeah,
sitting there
yeah.
yelling at the ancestors about how all of you were wrong and I listen,
God, Chadwick, right?
Chadwick, if Chadwick has 0 fans, that means that I have shuffled off this coil because like
Yeah,
I I felt
yeah,
personally cussed out by him, man. I
right?
felt cussed
Because
out by
you
him.
feel that way, right?
It's not
But
even
you do
my
feel that
ancestors who were
way.
doing stuff, but I felt cussed out by
Yeah,
him because like I think
yeah,
I need to do better. I need to
yeah,
figure
there you
out how
go.
I can do better by the people who are surrounding me. Like just because somebody is like people who are in my community are like there's broader ways of having a community than just the people who are sitting there like, right next to you.
Yeah.
And I think
And he
that like
realized
the
that
stress of
like,
that.
they cut it off. They cut all that
Yeah.
off, and I wanna say this as we're talking about T'Challa and his different iterations. Most of his iterations show him as this cool, kinda strategic leader, and I think what happened in the MCU and this is Chadwick. Chadwick really brought this out, that he is a man underneath. Not just
Mhm.
that he's angry at his ancestors and his fathers and the generations before him for cutting off Wakanda and cutting off Killmonger. This young Black man who could have thrived in Wakanda got cut off and left on his own, right? That pain, right? But there's also that one scene when his dad said, "You're a good man," and being a good man is really hard when you're trying to run a country. Like, that
Yeah.
scene right there helps me to really just show, just in that one scene, how it's important for us to see the depth of people. Good and bad are so
Yeah.
binary and just they're too, like, black and white. Most of us are humans who are doing the best that we can. And I think by his dad saying that to him, it really humanizes him, where it's like, son, you can't just be good. You can't just be noble. You can't just be jolly.
Exactly.
You have to learn how to get in the dirt and kind of manage the stuff, including your
'Cause
cousin and including the
I
stuff
feel
we
like
left to you, like
I
all
feel
of
like
that stuff.
T'Chaka was low key saying that he was like low key being like, I wasn't actually a good person. I may have been a good king, but I don't know that I qualify myself as a good person. And I think that
Yeah.
T'Chaka like not qualifying himself as a good person is like a whole other conversation to have too. Like
Yes.
even if it's just
Yes.
because the fratricide sat there and just like I know it weighed on him and I know that it weighed on like Zuri and everything, but
Yeah.
instead of actually like doing anything about that, they just are like, we're going to continue to like keep everything all locked down and pretend that like we're just like a bunch of sheep farmers and they're not. And I think that honestly with like T'Challa's like, like going out into the wider world and like being like Wakanda is a part of things. I think the fact that he is past and Shuri still has to figure out
Mm.
what she wants to do next is that's a whole other level of grief and I really want to talk about like her on the ancestral plane, so let's formally
Oof,
introduce
please
her
do.
as well.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that we are on the same page that Shuri is also the Black Panther, full stop. Black Panther, Shuri has that role. Okay, she was created by Reginald Hudlin and John Romita Jr. and she made her debut in Black Panther Volume 4 number 2 and 2005. So Shuri, like, we get her, she's brilliant and like, she's like, technical, like she's like the tech whiz and like, she's just like whip smart and everything. And she's to a certain extent, like enjoying being the spare almost because like she can spend all of her time like devoted to her science and her tinkering and just like have like the royal kind of just like funding for all of her projects and such. And I think that she's like really having a good time with that and being moved suddenly from like her position as the spare to the forefront of Wakanda and then having to deal with her position in the forefront of Wakanda. Like, because like, we have T'Challa losing T'Chaka and then we have
Yes.
Shuri losing Ramonda. And yet
Yes.
T'Challa
Yes.
goes to the ancestral plane in Wakanda where all the other ancestors are. And Shuri ends up in Oakland. T'Chaka didn't even die in Oakland. Like the only one who died in Oakland was her uncle.
But
Why
look
is
at that
Shuri's?
feel.
Why is she in Oakland? Why is she in Oakland with like a cousin who died in Wakanda? Like
Yeah.
to a certain extent, ancestrally, I don't understand why it is that she like her grief and anger at the things that are going on have her going to Oakland, with Killmonger instead of being able to go and fellowship with the rest of her ancestors. Now,
Right. Right.
are there arguments to be made that like, oh, well, since like Chadwick was gone and we didn't want her to go to like the regular like ancestral plane because then we might expect to see Chadwick, but like,
Yeah. Yeah.
are there are maternal lines that she could have sat there and had conversations with? Like why is it that Shuri
Yeah.
is not allowed to have the full expression of grief and the full connection with her ancestors that T'Challa is given?
Yeah.
Like
I would love to weigh in on that. And so one of the reasons why I love the way they actually did hers is because I think what we were watching with Shuri was a lot more than just grief, especially in the MCU, right? She
Mhm.
didn't just lose her brother, but she lost her dad too, right? And then
Yeah.
she lost her brother, right? And not only did she lose her brother, if you remember, she couldn't save him. So there was also this grief around, I'm supposed to be one of the smartest people in the world, and I couldn't save my brother, right? As you watch Ramonda trying to connect with her, trying to get her to grieve, you see her retreating away from it. She wants to go up here. I gotta figure
Mhm.
this out. I gotta figure this out. And grief is a
Yeah.
very embodied experience. You can't figure grief out in your head. You've got to feel it kind of throughout your body. And so one of the things that I noticed is that for Shuri, when she went into the ancestral plane, much like her cousin Killmonger,
In T'Chaka, yeah.
in the Jaka, thank you, right? They both came there with anger and rage. He was angry at the Wakandans for killing his dad and leaving him. She was angry at the Wakandans, or herself even, I think, for not being able to save her family, for not being able to save her mom, for not being able to save her brother, for not being able to save anybody. And I think that same rage and anger is what took her to Killmonger as opposed to the other ancestors. She wasn't ready yet, I don't think, to see them. And I think that anger is one of the pieces of grief that we often ignore. We want people to be sad, we want them to feel love, but we don't always have the capacity for people's anger when they're grieving. And I think it was really good to see that for her, to let her be angry. She was mad that all that happened to her and she didn't know what to do with all of it.
I am 100% on like the anger part, but like I think the thing that gets me is that like, there is the part where, like the part where like if T'Challa goes to the ancestral realm and like he's having like the conversations with father and everything, they're having like that first conversation where they're like, it's hard for a good man to be a good king. But then he goes back the next time, and that's when he's like sitting there, like he is also full of anger at everything that his ancestors have done.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm frustrated, is because like he is actively angry at them, and like he doesn't want to burn down the heart-shaped herb the way that Shuri and like Eric did, but he kind of torpedoed like everything that Wakanda had been about for like a number of years.
Yes.
And so it feels like, he was angry, but like her anger at her like extra grief and everything. And like, I don't know, it's like, I get like the anger, like kind of pushing her away from being able to like, see the other people, but it still is just like,
I think
like, why weren't
T'Challa's
like even like
anger
the
for
trees
me,
or anything? Like, yeah. Go ahead.
T'Challa's anger for me didn't feel like he was like, it felt like he needed to get his ancestor to understand him.
Mhm.
And this is just me speculating. Whereas I felt like Shuri's anger was actually more like her cousins. It felt like she was left. She felt like her ancestors left her. She felt like her family left her. She didn't feel that connection. Whereas I feel like that is something that Killmonger sometimes felt too. Like I was left on my own to figure this out. And to me,
Yeah.
the ancestral plane is kind of a metaphor for our consciousness. It's not just where we meet our ancestors, but it's like my consciousness now that I'm out of my physical body. I'm laying here. I'm not in my physical body. I'm in my consciousness now. What's stirring there and what will lead me into this space? The plane is not just about meeting people for joy or even to talk
Yeah.
to them. Sometimes it's a space, I think, for our emotional processing. So I think she deserved to be able to kind of be in that space. There's this, for me, what I kept coming up with her and what I think happens to her even as she's in her comics run is that she's asked to do so much, but
Mhm.
without people understanding her position, without people understanding her intersectionality, without people really understanding that being a Black woman, even in a sovereign country like Wakanda that really reveres women and their intelligence and their leadership, she still has had to deal with people coming against her. She's young, right? She's lost all of her family. And so all of her anger at that spot felt justified for me. And I really appreciate it. While
I
at the same
respect the
time, I
anger.
see what you're saying. I see what you're
Like,
saying. I see that
I love the
difference.
anger, but, like, I
Yeah.
don't maybe,
Yeah, I
I
see
guess
that difference
if,
though.
like, we'd seen, like, some of, like, the trees that the other panthers were, like, hanging out on
Yeah,
in the background,
she was not having that at all.
like,
Yeah.
I think that's the thing is just, like, why, you know, like and, you know, let's be honest, like, all of the
You
like,
know?
these ancestral planes, afterlife things, like, you know, it's not like space and distance work the same anyway,
No, it's
but,
not. And you
like
know what I was gonna say? Killmonger, actually, if you think about where he went back to his apartment in Oakland too. That apartment, like he didn't
yeah,
really go to the space. He went to that little in that little closed space, that little apartment in Oakland and sat there and talked to his dad, right? I
yeah,
think there are those spaces, right, for them where you go there for the ancestral plane that first time and you're like, who do I get to talk to? Who can hold what I'm feeling, I guess? And I know we're getting off on a
which
tangent here, but I'm just
no,
like,
no, no,
I feel like that's
but,
what
like, to a
the
certain
ancestral
extent,
plane kind of
like
has. Yeah.
if we're going to be able to have conversation, like if we're going to be able to, like, if we were able to tap into and work with our different ancestors, which we're not necessarily getting into discussions about like ATRs and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of like discussions about what it is, like how much ancestor like connection and conversation that you can have.
Yes.
But I imagine that to a certain extent that the kind of idea that we're coming to with this is that there's a little bit of the ancestral time that they were able to get was based really on what it is that they needed, even if it feels
I like
vaguely
that.
unfair, right? Like the ancestor that she needed was Killmonger to sit there and be
She
like,
really
well, what
did.
you want to do? What do
Yeah,
you want to
I
do?
agree.
All right.
I
And
agree.
the ancestor that T'Challa needed was, you know, like his dad to just be like, you got to figure out what you want to do. So I think that there's like, they both had like you have to figure out what you want to do. But I think it was a very different approach as to what is it that you want to do. And I feel like that's the only way that I can kind of like square that circle. But it still feels like, you know,
Yeah.
I wish
Yeah.
that that she was able to have other angry members of her
Yes.
ancestors
That
come
makes sense.
through. Because, like, you know, Intajaka going back to Oakland, that's where his daddy was. That's where, like, he really felt connected to his family. And that makes sense
Yes.
ancestrally.
Yes. Yes.
But you know what? We have spent a whole bunch of time talking about Black Panther 2, right? And I feel like
Yes.
if we're going to talk about Black Panther 2, we also have to make sure that we are highlighting, okay, code name Ironheart,
My
legal name
girl.
Riri Williams. She was created by Brian Michael Bendis and Mike Deodato Jr. She debuted in the Invincible Iron Man Volume 3, Number 7 in May 2016. As an aside, there is a very important Ironheart run written by E. Ewing, a Black woman comic writer, and we are going to be highlighting that part. But it's important that we talk about one, Riri Williams as Ironheart is not a reskin of Iron Man. She's not meant to be like, you know, like, "Oh, we're going to sit there and do like Iron Man again." No, Riri Williams was created as a brilliant genius inventor all on her own. Her sitting there like making her own Ironheart suit is because that's what she was able to do, okay? I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that if
Yeah.
Tony Stark can do that mess with a bunch of scraps, that I feel like being confused that Riri Williams could put that together with like MIT and selling inventions to other people to like gather
Yes.
funding for her other things. the fact of that, like, Riri Williams being able to put, like, her iron suit together absolutely makes sense, and I love that Marvel has sat there and just been like, "What should we do with all of our Black girls? I know, what if we make them impossibly smart?" Right? We've got, like, Ironheart, we've got Shuri, we got Moon Girl, or yeah, like, Moon Girl or Dinosaur Girl. Moon Girl and
Yeah,
Dinosaur
Moon
Girl,
Girl,
yeah.
Devil Dinosaur. Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, like, they're just like, "What if we just have all of our Black girls be, like, the smartest in the entire world?"
Monica Rambeau is really smart in
Monica Rambeau
Marvel's and Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel. She's super smart.
Monica Rambeau could also just, like, she would could come and slap me in the face, and I would say, "Thank you, may I have another?" Okay,
Same,
Monica Rambeau
same,
she's
same.
so cool. But
I
we're
agree.
talking about Riri, okay? We're talking
Yes,
about,
yes,
like,
ma'am.
this girl who sat there, like, and again, like, I really love how they have a lot of focus on with her grief and everything, like, within, like, the MCU thing and everything. Like, her grief is, I kind of refuse to acknowledge
Yeah,
that I am grieving in a lot of
yeah.
ways, until it gets to the point where she's making a deal with Mephisto, because she's hit a
Oof,
point where, like, her grief has, like, driven her to distraction, but she doesn't acknowledge that it's her grief that's driving her to distraction. So she's over
I
here
agree.
sitting there making, like, some dumb behind choices because
Yeah,
she's not like, look,
yeah.
we're not like there's a whole conversation to be had about whether or not BetterHelp is, like, a thing, but please, for the love of God, like, Dr.
Get help.
Mercedes, are you taking clients? Please, if
Yeah,
people need to see a therapist, they have to go and see someone. You
yeah.
have to,
But I feel
like,
like I'll be honest with you. One of the things, and it happened with Shuri, and I think it happens with smart Black girls, is that we get labeled once we become smart. And
mhm,
all of that other stuff gets filtered through that. So when we're grieving, people say, "Oh, why are you grieving? You're so smart. You can do anything." Right? And this
yeah,
idea that our intellect will overcompensate for the grief or the trauma or the stuff that we're dealing with. And it really doesn't. And I think when you look at something like Riri or someone like Riri, she's not just a smart Black girl. She's an adolescent. She's a young adult smart Black girl
true.
who is constantly being influenced by people saying, "But you're so smart. But you're so smart. But you're so smart. You can build an Iron Man suit. You can build anything." And then she's still sitting with, "I've lost my stepdad. I've lost my best friend. I've lost these people who were kind of anchoring me.
Yeah,
Now I don't have them anymore. All I do have is my intelligence." She has to build like an emotional core, kind of like the arc reactor. She's kind of got to
mhm,
build her own emotional arc reactor to kind of help power her, as opposed to just having it be her Ironheart suit, if
yeah.
that makes sense. Right?
Yeah, no, like, and I think that, like, in many ways they do have the parallels with, like, the arc reactor, and, like, the way that, like, they have the AI, like, so basically it's, like, proof that Tony Stark has a heart because the arc reactor is there so that, like, he doesn't die, right? And the AI is kind of like proof that Riri does too, because, like, it's basically pulled every single grieving memory that she has had and turned it, like, like, she sat there and, like, super chat GPT, like, her
Right?
thing, because she sat
Right?
there and just, like, her memories of her best friend are so vivid, are so
Yeah.
strong. She is able to sit there. I can't get chat GPT to figure out my voice, and yet she's
Right.
able to sit there and get her
Right.
AI to sit there and, like, nail
Right.
down, like, the kind of
Right.
things that, like, her best friend said. That
Right.
is
And I feel like it's a complicated mourning kind of thing too, because in the comics and in the TV show Ironheart, she kind of uses Natalie as this emotional kind of service human, as it's kind of so to speak, right? Where she doesn't have to always think about her emotions because Natalie will be there. The AI will be there to kind of help
yeah.
her. Even those times when she helped her breathe or help her manage her panic attacks, right? She
Mhm.
kind of took on this emotional kind of person for her. And so I think you're right. There's this parallel between the arc reactor being Tony's emotional center, but Natalie kind of being this complicated, grieving, relational thing where the AI becomes her comfort, or her like Linus blanket. She sucks her thumb and holds on to that, right? It's kind of
I
transitional.
mean,
Her friend's not
you know,
really dead, right? Like all of these
and
things are still there for her to kind of grieve, but they're not tangible. It's kind
yeah.
of like, it's kind of like fleeting, if you will.
The resilience that she expects of herself also, like, really negatively impacts her, because, like, if her mom wants to sit there and be like, "Let me support you." I mean, that's her mom's husband who died.
Oof,
Like, if my
oof,
man died and my kid was more upset about it than I was, I would
yeah,
feel a bit awkward, but, like, her mom is sitting there like, "Let me be here for you. Let me support you. Let me have your back." And she's just like, "What if instead of doing that, I completely shut you out?" And see,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
now I'm like, I don't know, like, we haven't really seen like Riri on the ancestral plane, but I feel like to a certain extent, Riri, if she had like an ancestral plane thing like Shuri, she would also be like shutting out so many
Yeah.
people that
Yeah. Her dad
like,
and Natalie would not have shown up at her ancestral plane because she was shutting them out so much. She was having such a hard time grieving them. And I want to say this, one of the things that's a common misconception is people are trying to shut people out. What people are doing when they're grieving is they're trying to shut themselves in so they don't feel anything else. That wall that from your point of view feels like, oh, they won't let me in, from their point of view is protecting them. It's keeping them from being hurt. So behind my wall, I'm being protected. But what you're seeing is a wall that you can't get in, right? And so for Riri, she's thinking, what if I just put this suit of armor around myself, then I could save everybody? But what it's doing is really closing people off from really being able to connect with her, if you think.
because like having a suit of armor isn't necessarily going to make her 10 seconds faster in the past.
Right.
And,
Right. But she doesn't think
you know,
about that. She's just like, I got to do it. I got to go. I got to do it. Right.
and that now I was actually like, I know Eric Voss was really excited when we finally got Mephisto showing up for real. Like, he was just like, I know
Yeah.
that he sat there and was just like crying,
Yeah.
screaming, throwing up. He's just
Yeah.
like, this is the best thing. But like the fact that Riri was like so unwilling to like actually acknowledge and deal with her grief is the reason that Mephisto was able to like kind of
Yeah.
manifest at her at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think she also felt like, again, going back to that smart thing, I'm smarter than him. I can somehow outsmart this, or I can somehow get what I want without him knowing. She did that earlier in the season with Parker, where she's like, oh, I can just cut off a piece of his cloth and he won't know. There's this space in our mental and emotional wellness that we sometimes rely on our logic and our intellect more than our emotional spaces because that space feels too much. It's way too much. It's way too big, but I'm smart and I can think my way out of it. And so I think there's
Mm.
also that piece of I can think my way out of this contract with Mephisto. I can kind of like pull the switcheroo, but she's not really realizing people like Mephisto you can't do that with. But she's, I think, in her mind thinking she can.
I mean, it's possible that she doesn't recognize the fact that like he is like an possibly ancient lord of hell. She just thinks that
Thank you.
he's like, so like, maybe
Yeah.
a bit more sorcerer supreme kind of vibes. And
Like that she
you
could
know,
take him on, one-on-one kind of in a sense.
yeah, I feel like, if there was a situation where Riri and Steven were going back and forth, like I feel like the two of them could have like a very interesting battle of wits kind of situation, especially when her brain finishes forming, because it's worth pointing out the fact that Riri Williams is not like what I think it's like it finishes around like 25, 26.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Riri's brain is still cooking. It's still cooking. She's still
And
young.
let's throw this out there. Not only is it still cooking, but it's still cooking with trauma and grief wrapped around it. So
Yes.
it's cooking with some of that in there too. And I think we forget that with her because she's so smart. And I'll throw this in here too for listeners to kind of pay attention to. We also tend to adultify Black girls a little bit. And so if you think
Yes.
about Riri, she lost her family when she was like 15. Then she went to MIT when she was like 16. So she's still a kid who's trying to live in a world where people have adultified or where you're smart. You're an adult, make the best decisions. And she's still a kid. Like you said, her brain, her ideas,
Oh
all of
yeah.
that's still cooking. This is why I think it made sense to me that she ended up taking that deal with Mephisto because as a kid, you think I'm invincible. I can survive this easy peasy. You're not thinking
Hmm.
about those long-term ramifications of kind of getting entwined with someone who has that much influence and has that much power over you.
It's possible too that there's a certain amount of it that she didn't entirely believe in it too. And
Yeah.
I want to highlight the whole
Yeah.
like any like sufficiently advanced technology indistinguishable from magic. Okay,
Yeah.
like
I agree with
because
you.
let's be
I
honest,
agree.
like 1700s people are gonna walk into our house and they're gonna be like, y'all are some wizards. Like you could sit there and like pull on your phone and like have like a band playing on like a device over here.
We don't even have to go that far. My great aunt, who was born in 1922, when I showed her my phone, she was like, how do you have the pictures in there? Like, you're right. Like, it's so
Like
magic, right?
again, like imagine any of the guys from Timely Comics like seeing the stuff that is going on from like 19. There's a lot that has changed and it's really cool. And I think that one of the things that like, we're not nobody's being diagnosed here. Okay. We are all big proponents of staying within like, our approved practice areas. But I do think that one of the things that like I have seen in my research is that there is a difficulty in naming and acknowledging your emotions with a number of different neurodivergencies.
Yes.
And Like, I am not necessarily suggesting or saying that Riri Williams has a specific neurodivergency,
Yeah.
but I'm going to say that, like, I have been chastised by my therapist for my kind of insistence upon thinking my way through the things that have been, like,
Yeah.
like, actively, let's like, stressing me out for a number of years. Like, no, I can think my way through it. Really? Because has thinking has solved it for you in the last 20 years? No, but that's just because I haven't thought of the right thing yet.
There you go.
Right?
And see,
Exactly.
that what you just said is exactly how Riri responds to everything, "Because I can. Because I can." Well, why would you do that? "Because I can." It's that same level, whether it's neurodivergent or not, and let me just say this for everyone listening. Neurodivergence has so many layers to it that it becomes kind of this umbrella term to really help us understand the ways in which we process, the ways in which we interact with people, and the ways in which we kinda understand ourselves. And so I'm not gonna knock Riri, especially in her iteration on Disney Plus, or in the show Ironheart for having any neurodivergence. If she does, she does. But I definitely think that idea of I can think my way through this is something that happens a lot for folks who are smart, for folks who do see patterns in different things, who can kind of quickly process things because it's so easy. I can quickly process it. So when you can't, right, it's really important to have that space to say, I can usually quickly process, but when I can't, I need kind of a nice safe space to land and say, huh, I can't. I
Yeah.
believe that Riri had that, but she didn't know how to access it. She had it in Xavier, right, which he lost his sister to. She had it
Mhm.
in her mom when she lost her partner as well. She had it in her aunts, right? She had it in her community. I think we have to talk about how sometimes even having all of that community, if you are behind a wall or if you're behind your Ironheart suit, it's hard to
Yeah.
see that those people are there for you, reaching out for you, if that makes sense.
Yes. Although what I will say is, like, if we're going to talk about the people who are there for you and reaching out for you, I think that it is important to talk about, like, our resident Black therapist. All right. Because now I realize that, Riri is up in Chicago and, like, Sam being down in DC, like, there might be, like, some kind of licensing, practicing things. But, she could take her little Ironheart suit and fly her behind down to go and see Falcon, aka Captain America, aka
AK,
Sam Wilson, all right, Blacked in America, ooh, ooh, who
I
was created by
love that.
Stan Lee and Gene Colan. He debuted in what? Captain America number 117 in 1969, okay? Him getting the shield is honestly, like, it is a huge deal, but also it
Yeah.
kind of feels like it makes the most sense, especially like, he's
Yes.
debuting in Captain America and like he's over here just like
Yes.
he's not like
Yes.
he's not like Bucky at Captain America, like because he's out there, he's a whole his own whole superhero and he's out there doing stuff. But Sam Wilson like is out there, he's just like he's helping Cap actually sit there and deal with like, like what happens after like all the time on the ice.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
out there like helping people who are just in general struggling with like all of, like the various PTSDs and stuff. And
Yeah.
like he's sitting there
Yeah.
having his most like therapist life out there and everything. And yet at the same time, he is still having a bunch of his own struggles. Like the man's
Yeah.
imposter syndrome is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how do you
So
have
yeah.
how do you have Captain America himself, like, sit there and, like, be old as all get out, okay? Joe Biden is just like, "Hey, use a little bit of moisturizer, okay? Like, you're looking kinda old there, up in there." But, like, Cap is, like, sitting there just like "I am old, I've had time to think about this, I know who it is that I want this to go to, right? I want you to
Yeah.
take this."
Yeah.
Sam sitting there freaking out and being like, I don't know if I can handle all of this responsibility
Yeah.
and freaking out because of like, other blacks, like the other black super, was it Isaiah, I want to say it,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
other black super soldier, like trying to sit there and be like, I can't take on this mantle. And that imposter syndrome is the reason that we ended up with John Walker killing people. And, there's a certain amount of it that I can understand, like, being anxious about, like, I'm just a therapist. I'm just a guy who has, like, a cool, like, fighty suit thing that I got from Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Why do you
Yeah.
think that I am ready to be like, Steve Rogers 2.0? Because, like,
Yeah.
Steve Rogers is, like,
Yeah.
everyone knows Steve Rogers. Everyone is just like, wow, Captain America, he's the best, blah, blah, blah.
I think that was the whole imposter syndrome. He had to figure out how not to be Steve Rogers 2.0. He had to figure out how to be Sam Wilson, right? And I think that's the piece of it that often happens when we think about what happened for him, going from kind of being Falcon, and if you especially use his MCU space, not only was he Falcon, he actually had already done a tour. He had already lost a partner. He was now kind of living his life as the vet kind of social worker, the vet, group leader. He wasn't even thinking about superhero-ness and then getting pulled into it, decided to go ahead and serve his country again alongside
Mhm.
Captain America, and then getting bestowed that responsibility. It wasn't just a shield, but you're now Captain America. You're now the mantle for America. And being a Black man, I think that was a really huge weight.
Yeah.
Learning about Isaiah Bradley and what happened to him, that was a huge weight too, because now he's contending with, I didn't know this history, but now I'm
Mhm.
being tasked with having to hold a shield that has this history about it. And so when we're thinking about like what you're talking about, imposter syndrome, I often like to teach people that when we're dealing with marginalized bodies, we're not just dealing with imposter syndrome, we're also dealing with the weight of what it means to be in that body, the weight
Mm.
of being a Black man carrying, like he says it in Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I'm a Black man carrying the stars and stripes. Like, I'm very aware of all of no, the representations of that and all the
Yeah.
complications that come with that. And so for me, I think one of my favorite pieces of watching his arc is him realizing that he has to be Sam and he has to wear the suit and carry that shield the way Sam would, not the way
Correct.
Steve would do it, not the way Isaiah would do it, but the way he would. And I think that's been a really good arc for him to really show that he cannot be any of these other people. He has to show up as himself.
I think the time that he spent just like throwing the shield and just like doing his own flips and techniques and stuff like that, I
Yeah.
really appreciated that because a lot of the way that they did that, he was just doing it by himself. And also, I think one of the things that I want to really highlight too is that Isaiah was had like soldier serum. Steve has soldier serum. And Sam is just like, I am a super soldier on my own. Thank you. I don't need your serum, nothing. I could do this on my own. And the fact that he sat there and also like too, like I love that he's like sitting there making sure that we're not just like continuing to like, like he's got his Falcon is Latin, and
Yeah.
like we're continuing
Yeah.
to make sure
I
that like
love
like
that.
we're passing on like these like I'm giving up this mantle and I'm going to pass it on to somebody else who is going to both work with this and also grow in this. And
Yeah.
like I don't know if he's
Yeah.
like sitting there being like I'm going to pass it on to you with an intent of you like eventually like taking on the mantle from me, like I don't think he's
That would be
going
cool.
quite that, but I do think that it's really cool the way that he's sitting. My God, can you imagine Latino like Captain America, especially like after the Benito Bowl, where he sat there and with all of the countries all the way
You
up
see
like
me
south to
you
north,
see me where I'm like, "Yeah. Yeah." Right?
that would be so cool. That would be so cool because like the Americas are more than just the United States. Like, it's honestly the height
See,
of
see,
US American arrogance to like call ourselves
I
Americans,
agree.
but
I agree.
but like Sam Wilson is out here and he is struggling to do it. And he goes through his like dark night of the soul and everything. And yet he's able to not only get past the imposter syndrome about like anxiety about whether or not I'm worthy to carry the shield to he's out there going and like talking down a
Mhm.
whole Red Hulk as a counselor, not
Yes.
not punching the Red
Yes.
Hulk, not fighting the Red Hulk, talking to the Red Hulk, bringing him down, because like the whole thing is just like I am too full of emotion to function. I am too overly
Woo.
emotional, and everything is big, and I can't move except for to like have all of these emotions.
Yeah.
And Sam is just like, well, what if we work on this? Like, what if we talk about the things that are going on? Like, you're having these like these reactions and these things, but like, look at how your reactions are impacting like the people
Love it.
that you love. Like, look at how
I
these things are
love it.
going. Let's woosah. Let's figure out how it is that we can figure out different ways for us to do things. I feel like Sam Wilson is one of the few times that we actually see mental health in like the
Thank you.
Marvelverse, like really like
Yes.
pulled together and like
Yes.
made a focus. And I think part
Yes.
of the reason that people didn't like Cap was it Cap 3 or Cap 4? Like the
4
reason that
now.
the reason they didn't like it as much is I think because like he was like spending more of his time and energy on I'm going to talk you down from the things, and people are kind of expecting like I'm going to have like a big punch fight or whatever and everything
Yeah,
like that, but
yeah.
there are so many ways to deal with issues besides just punching them.
Yes. And I love that that's embedded in him from jump. Like the first time you meet him in the MCU, right? Like he's out here doing his run, he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. And when he talks to Steve, he actually invites him to a group. He says, "Hey, come on down, man. I run a group. Let's talk if you need to." The whole time that you meet him, this is how he is. He's about pulling people in. He's about making sure that people feel seen. Even the villain, right? I love that one scene in Brave New World where Sidewinder's like, the buyer told me you would try to talk me down. He like shoots him instead of like tries to talk to him. It seems like that constantly show that Sam will try his best to say, "Hey, let's talk before we start punching. Let's see what's going on." He can still punch and he can still fight and he can still kick behind. But before
Mhm.
he does all that, he's like, "Hey, what's up? How are you doing?" That's me.
Yeah.
I'm that person. I can kick your behind for sure if I need to, but I'm definitely going to sit with you and say, like, where are you feeling that in your body? What are you noticing? And that can feel really jarring for folks. If you're
Mhm.
listening to this and you're like, "Bleh," let me just be real with you. You get to say, "Bleh." Learning how to feel things and name things is exactly why I love Sam Wilson, because he does that for him. He actually does that with Red Hulk. He's like, "You remember the cherry blossoms? You remember how great that is?" It's like he reminds people that you're human underneath
There's
all
a
of that super
lot.
soldier serum, right?
Yes. There's a lot of, like, the whole, like, feel your feelings things that a lot of people feel like you might as well just be saying, like, "Fold in the cheese." Like, "Feel your feelings, fold in the cheese." What?
Exactly. It's
How
the
do you feel
same
your
thing for them.
feelings? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. How do you fold in some cheese? Like, none of
Yeah.
it really
Yeah.
makes sense, and Sam actually, like,
Yeah.
really invites and encourages us as, like, viewers and as, like, people sit there and, like, that extra second of, like, what is it that we are stressing out about? What is it that's going on? Because to a certain extent, honestly, there's a lot of the Brave New World, storyline that could have been if he had not been able to sit there and talk it out and figure out what was going on and like get to the bottom of the thing instead of just like kind of like reacting based upon actions and such, like the
Right.
world would have been an international incident. Adamantium,
Yeah.
vibranium, all of it would have been like, it would have been a
Yeah.
whole free-for-all. And
Right.
I think that Sam was able to sit there and be like, you know what, we got to figure out how we can make this work. And because we can make this work, have, World War Tiamat or whatever, right? Like we
Yes.
don't
Exactly.
have like all of the
Exactly.
powers like sitting there just like being like, well, we all are going to just like sit there and like go for the celestial all at once and like fuck me to whatever else anybody else is doing.
Exactly.
Cause,
Exactly.
there's like colonialism and like, gold rushes have led to a lot of deaths. So Sam has probably saved millions of lives in ways that he didn't even realize.
I
So,
agree. I agree.
we're
You're not
gonna,
wrong.
we're gonna take a quick break to, breathe through all of the lives that he has saved, and we'll be back with our thrilling conclusion.
Ba 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 ba.
Welcome back to our thrilling conclusion. So, I think one of the things that we've kind of come to overall in our discussion is that there's a lot of instances of grief and trauma and just active issues that are going to cause all kinds of problems for like the psyche for like a lot of our Marvel characters in general, but like as we're talking about like our Black characters, it's really interesting to see, I think, all of the ways that grief and trauma is explored with all of the different characters. How like Riri is hiding herself off from the world, sure, going off to like a different part of the ancestral plane. T'Challa is cussing out his ancestors, and Luke Cage is sitting there trying to figure out how to both manage being invulnerable and also like, having a kid with somebody who could punch him into next week. And you have Storm sitting there just like, let me sit there and deal with all of the PTSD that I have in life. And they're like, they're really making it more so that these aren't things that are just kind of happening to our characters. They're
Yes.
parts of our characters. And I really love how like they're actually like kind of making a point of making note of mental health as an issue at all to like discuss.
Yes. Yes.
Like
Yes.
I want to know like what it like because you have like mental health is like your bread and butter. So like I want to get like your kind of big thoughts on this. Like, is Marvel actually like doing? Are they making enough moves towards like showing like are they making like societally acceptable moves? Are they a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
slow? Like, where do you
Yeah.
feel like Marvel is getting on this?
I feel like it's a little bit of both. I think that the world is starting to come online a little bit more about how mental health influences our everyday. And with
Hmm.
that, like, you have Riri having a panic attack. You actually have people talking about things in the MCU, the Thunderbolts, right? That whole
Hmm.
movie is literally about mental health. And so I think there is more awareness, but there's not enough of a container around how do we talk about this and how do we help people really understand the depths of mental and emotional wellness. And so that's kind of why I developed that idea of a director of mental wellness and representation to kind of work at studios like Marvel to support them in not just saying, okay, here's a mental health issue, but to say, okay, like, how does this work? How do people actually take this in? And to kind of really look at how does production make sure that mental wellness is represented in a way that people can actually understand it, learn from it, and grow from it. And it's not just this frivolous thing that's being thrown into the films and TV scripts, if that makes sense.
So there is a show that I really enjoyed, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and like partway through season 3, they'd actually sent a bunch of the character descriptions around to a bunch of different psychologists and psychiatrists, and it's like, hey, like based on these kind of things, like what sort of like actual diagnosis would you give her? Like, you know, all of like everything came together, and they gave her character a diagnosis within the context of the show. And I think that there is a certain value that can be had in taking like these different things have happened to different characters, you know,
Yes.
like these are the ways
Yes.
that these are the ways that some of them have been responding to things, like even if like because again we are not diagnosing anybody here, there is no
Mhm.
diagnosis here, but given that, you know, like we have like these kind of different trauma history things going on, presumably we could probably figure out like some of the things that are that are going to be more or less true to how people would respond based on the traumas that they've received. Riri Williams going and deciding after like Natalie's death to like put her hair in pigtails and skip down the street with like an oversized lollipop absolutely doesn't make any sense. Like, even if we're just sitting there being like, "Oh, she somehow broke in her childhood thing," like, there needs to be a more of a build in, like, how does that break happen? Like, what happens with it? Like, you know, with Moon Knight, I feel like they had, like, a version of it, they had a conceit of it, but even with
Yeah,
Moon
yeah,
Knight,
yeah,
they, like
yeah, yeah. And I'll
I
say
feel like
this, all the things that you mentioned are bringing awareness to it. What the mental wellness and representation director will do will make it actually tangible and practical so people can't just say, "Oh, I feel something while I'm watching this stuff," but people are actually being taught, people are actually learning, and people are not just learning therapy speak for the sake of therapy speak, they're using it as a way to actually engage and learn and build that community around mental wellness. And so if you notice, I call it mental wellness and representation, not just health, because it's about this idea of how can we be mentally well all around our
Mm,
communities, our families, our films, our TV shows, the media that we consume. Like it should all kind of be this ecosystem of wellness, where as we engage with it and interact with it, it doesn't make us feel worse about ourselves. It actually makes us feel more connected and better about ourselves. That's kind of my kumbaya, vision of having this person exist in studios.
I mean, listen, if we can have the god of stories holding everything together, then we can probably have a director of mental wellness to, you know, hold brains together or something. You know,
Yep.
Tom
Yep.
Tom can't do this forever. Okay.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but outside of like what it is that Tom can do forever, I will say that we should go ahead and look at our calendar and see what we actually have going on like that for Marvel and DC and, you know, whatever else in like the cartoon world, right? And I say whatever else in the cartoon world because February 26th, 1908, Tex Avery was born. And now, if you're not familiar with Tex Avery cartoons, I don't know how really to explain his style to you, but, basically, all of the "Hello Nurse" that we got from Animaniacs is a parody of the way that people would react to, like, you know, he would have, like, the wolf with, like, losing its mind in their things whenever there was a pretty girl on screen, alright? There's a lot of Tex Avery that you have probably seen that you may not necessarily remember. But in addition to Tex Avery, like let's take it back to like the kind of comics that you might actually remember because we have John Stewart becomes our first Black Green Lantern in February 1971, which is actually like a very involved story with him and Hal Jordan and stuff like that. it's super cool. So we also have, interestingly, like not the same like kind of notoriety per se, but Dracula Volume 1, number 1 actually came out in February of 1973, because podcast listeners will remember that there was a point in time in which there was a lot more horror going on with like comic books than there were superheroes, and this is right in the time that horror was like really popping off. So we have a whole bunch of stuff. But what we also have too is the entry, like the beginning of the very kind of short-lived giant-sized superheroes. So that released on February 20th in 1974, and that's like Volume 1, number 1. So you have Spider-Man teaming up with like Morbius and stuff like that. Okay, so like this is an absolutely ridiculous like kind of story, and I can kind of see why it might not have lasted forever. That's because I don't know, maybe Morbid time was way cooler back in the day. Who knows? I don't know. But what I do know is that, listeners, we have come to the end of our podcast. I know. How is it over so soon? Well, good news. Our next episode is coming out next week. You're also more than welcome to listen to this one again if that's not fast enough, or you can join the Patreon.
Nerd cred takes time to build.
But if you can sit there and move from having a Harley Quinn who is on staff to a Harley Quinn who needs her own staff, well, maybe we can actually have a conversation about how mental wellness works on multiple levels. So, all right. And now it's time to mention that we have an Instagram. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube. We're working on expanding our reach. If you like the episode, do the normal things: rate, review, subscribe, 5 stars, especially if you're trying to up your nerd cred. You can follow us across Instagram at Upper Nerd Cred Pod. If you're looking for me across platforms, I'm at Kira C. Davis. And Dr. Mercedes, where can our podcast listeners find you?
You can pretty much find me everywhere online as Dr. Mercedes Samudio. Instagram, Threads, everywhere.
I'll make sure that is spelled out and like the at is in there, because like if you are not following her, then you are missing out on a lot of gems. Like just spreading them all over the place. And Kevin Feige, you're not following her correctly, because otherwise you would have hired her. So Kevin, get on it. Anyway,
get on it.
If you have a burning question that you would like for us to discuss so that you can up your nerd cred, make sure you like, subscribe, leave comments, and if we pick your question, we'll shout you out at the discussion segment. Also, like I said, we've launched the Patreon, and while you should definitely follow the link in the show notes to join it, you should also get your friends to like and subscribe too, and your family members, and any of your coworkers that you trust not to be weird about listening to the same podcast as you, and maybe your Uber driver. Good night, everybody. All right.